This is Robert Stearns. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in. I really believe that learning is one of the greatest joys in life. And one of the greatest ways to learn is simply to have meaningful conversations, both with those who come from a similar background as yours, as well as those whose background might be very different. So my hope is that as we connect and converse with leaders from all around the world, that we will learn and grow together. If you're new with us, hit the subscribe button and we'll deliver the new episodes to you right away. So wherever you are, on a run, in the car, at the kitchen table with some coffee, welcome to the conversation. And welcome indeed. Welcome indeed. I am very obviously not in the studio, but let me know, can you hear me? Can you see me? I'm coming to you from an undisclosed location. It is me, a very jet-lagged Bishop Robert tonight. I am jet-lagged. I don't know what time zone I'm in. As most of you are aware, I just landed back from Israel late yesterday. And so my internal clock is all over the place. We had an amazing, amazing trip to Israel. Thank you for praying for me and praying for our team. We were there with YWAM, Youth with a Mission. Wonderful. Thank you, Frank Rabel. Thank you, Sonia, Carol. The whole team is here. Go ahead and sign on in. Tell us your name and tell us the city that you are watching from. All right. Your name and the city that you're watching from. Everybody go ahead and sign in. Hit the share button. Can you hit the share button for us? That will help get this live broadcast quickly out to a larger audience. We can get the room filled up. Thank you, Ann Crinzy. It is good to be here. Hey, David Necrootman. David Necrootman there with us. God bless you, David. I'm going to see David tomorrow and looking forward to being with my brother, David. I am in Nashville, Tennessee. We're gathering here tomorrow for a memorial service. I'm sorry, not tomorrow, Saturday, for a memorial service of a wonderful, wonderful lady who played an incredible part in the history of Eagles Wings and of my life, and that is Billy Ann Smith, who went home to be with the Lord a few weeks ago. She was a great lover of Jesus, a lover of the Bible, a lover of Israel and the Jewish people. I met her in Jerusalem in 1991 at the Feast of Tabernacles celebration. And she became an incredible friend to our ministry for so many years. David, I had the privilege of introducing David. I remember the dinner that I brought David and Rabbi Meister to the home where I'm sitting tonight in Nashville, Tennessee. Many, many years ago. It would have been about 2000 and I think 3 or 4 that I brought David Necrootman and Rabbi Meister here, and they became wonderful friends. So we're going to gather on Saturday here in Nashville and celebrate this amazing lady. What a great group you are. I'm not sick. It's just my voice, because right now it is, what time is it for me? Oh, it is 4 a.m. for me right now, I think, Israel time. But what a great group from literally all across the nation who are gathered here tonight. If you haven't signed in, please quickly do so. Give us your name and where you're watching from. It's going to be a great night. We have one of my absolute favorite rabbis, and we want to bring him on quickly But I want to give you a few quick announcements. Now is the time, now, to sign up for you to join me in Israel September the 26th. September the 26th to October the 7th. Go to watchmantour.com. They'll put that in the comments, please. Watchmantour.com. It's going to be an amazing time. This trip to Israel, like every trip, there's never a trip that is not amazing. This was an incredible, incredible trip. I hope that you'll join us. And then coming up very soon, March the 12th at 6 p.m. March the 12th at 6 p.m. is going to be our New Jersey Celebrates Israel. It is in New Brunswick, New Jersey. So if you're in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or New York, join us there. And they will put all of these details into the comment section, please. And then for the West Coasters, April the 1st, we're gathering in Rancho Cucamonga, California. I just like saying Rancho Cucamonga. I'm not speaking in tongues, but it sounds like it. Rancho Cucamonga. Oh, Frank, you and Pam are coming to Israel. You're coming with me, I hope. Frank, we can't wait to have you there with us. But we will have April the 1st, what we think is going to be, it might be the largest Passover interfaith Passover Seder in history. Rabbi Erica Gerson and Mark Gerson will be leading it there. It's going to be amazing. And so Dina will put those details in. And then, of course, East Coast Conference coming up in the summertime. All of that is going to be amazing. Can you all do me a favor? Talk amongst yourselves for 15 seconds because I have to get a bottle of water for my voice. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in 15 seconds. Go to the comment section. Type in. You get so much more out of this when you interact with the body of Christ, with your brothers and sisters. 15 seconds. I'll be right back. All right, oh my goodness, look at you, Ben. That was incredibly professional. My producer, Ben, had an actual sign up there. Ben, you're doing great, Ben. That is amazing. Okay, I've got a bottle of water. That will help my voice. Yes, Ruth Juarez. Wonderful. Look at Ruth. She's putting all that in here. I will be at the Legacy International Conference Center in San Diego. April 6th through the 8th. So thank you so much for that. Lots going on, all kinds of things happening. I think there's also a Heckler Legacy Society date coming up. If you have not yet gone through that webinar, it is extraordinary, and I ask you to join us. Folks, we only can do what we do in the nations of the earth because you partner with us. That is the only way we are able to accomplish what we do. And what God has given us the grace to do, I hope you followed along with the YWAM trip. It is just literally historic. It's so incredible, so encouraging. Become a part of the Eagles Wings family today. Make your first donation. Go to eagleswings.org/donate. And if you've not yet become a monthly partner, I need you. I cannot do this alone. This ministry is on the cutting edge of bringing Jew and Gentile together in God's purposes for the world right now, and we need your help. So I think there's a Heckler Legacy Society meeting coming up as well, so somebody can put that in. All right, enough of all of that. We have with us tonight, honestly, one of my absolute favorite rabbis. Rabbi Bronstein was with us. I'm just getting the notes here on my phone. Normally the notes are all printed out for me, but I've got them here on my phone. Rabbi Avraham Bronstein is, yes, say hi to Pastor Ed Bez. Let's get Pastor Ed Bez in here. Rabbi Avraham Bronstein is the congregational rabbi at the Hamptons Synagogue in Hamptons, New York. And the times that I've been able to interact with him, he is wise, he is discerning, he is insightful, he's thoughtful, he is thought-provoking. And I never walk away from a conversation with him where I am not strengthened and challenged. And I know that's going to be the same for us tonight. So we're thrilled to have him here. Just before we bring him on, thank you for all your notes and your prayers. Yes, Saturday I will be conducting the funeral. So please pray for me. It's going to be hard to conduct that service when the friend is so very, very close. I'll be preaching Sunday morning. If you're in the Nashville area or you have friends in the Nashville area, I'll be preaching in Murfreesboro, Tennessee on Sunday. And so if we have those details, they can drop them in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'll be preaching Sunday morning, and then I'll be flying on Tuesday to Los Angeles for the funeral of Pastor Jack Hayford, where I will also be speaking at Pastor Jack Hayford's funeral. So thank you for your prayers. Follow along on social media. But tonight, we launch into a beautiful Torah study with our friend who's been patiently waiting. I apologize, I'm not at my best, but I am sure that Rabbi Avraham Bronstein will be at his best. He always is. Come on, everybody. Give a huge Rabbi and Bishop and the Rabbi welcome to Rabbi Avraham Bronstein. Rabbi, are you there? There you are.
Here. So good to see you.
Welcome. How are you, my brother?
I'm following you on Facebook. So thank you for the flattering introduction. You're getting over jet lag. I'm getting over a bit of a cold. So we're almost in the same boat. And that was really, I was just listening to your introduction, and I just want to say I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, Rabbi, you and I have the blessing of shepherding and connecting and with God's help, helping to lead beautiful, beautiful people. And they become a part of our lives. And we really begin to see all the principles that we're talking about. You start to see them played out in the lives of people. And there's no place on earth like the state of Israel where you see those lessons played out every day. And you realize, in a certain sense, the Bible is still being written today because God is writing his story. God is writing his divine covenantal fulfillment through each and every one of our lives.
It's a really powerful thought. There's a Kabbalistic notion that says that every single soul corresponds to a letter in God's Torah scroll. So that almost exactly says what you were saying.
Oh, that is beautiful. I've never heard that before. That's beautiful. Expound on that for just a moment.
There's a million different ways to understand that, but the idea basically, and that's the idea basically is what I just said, that God's Torah scroll, each letter corresponds to a different soul. So if there's approximately 600,000 letters in a Torah scroll, more or less, right? The rabbi said, hey, there's 600,000 Israelites who left Egypt. It's like a one-to-one correspondence. That must mean something. So that means everybody whatever sense
Amazing.
that means, is a letter in God's Torah scroll. What that really means is that nobody can stand by themselves.
That's right.
And without every single person, there's something very, very serious that's missing.
I love it. I love it. And of course, Rabbi, one of the things I remember about you, now, are you still commuting with is it your daughter?
My son.
Your son.
We found better transportation, but I'm still commuting 50 miles a day to teach sixth grade at the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County, which is really, it's fun. It's restorative. There's nothing purer than teaching 12-year-olds.
You know what? They're wet cement, and you have the opportunity to make an impression. When I think back on my journey, really some of those formative teachers early on, I grew up in a church that had a wonderful Sunday school. And I remember the stories, I remember the impact. And so God bless you as you teach sixth graders in the midst of everything else you do, leading the incredible congregation that you do. Well, Rabbi, we're going to dive into it tonight. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, because again, I am profoundly jet lagged. But are we we're in Parsha Yitro tonight? Is that right?
We are in Parshat Yitro, right? That's Exodus chapters 18 through 20.
Right. And for us Gentiles, folks, Yitro we pronounce Jethro. And of course, Jethro is the father-in-law of Moses. Moses' father-in-law, who ends up becoming his counselor, ends up becoming someone who gives wisdom to him. And Rabbi, it's one of these stories in the scripture where a Jew and a Gentile are interacting together for the purpose of God. And of course, we celebrate that principle tonight, right? With the Rabbi.
No, 100%. It's interesting. People have noticed that through the cycle of Torah portions, there are 3 that are named for individual people. Right? Usually the portion is named just for the first few words of the portion. There are 3 portions that are named for people. Right? Yitro, Jethro is one. The portion of Noah is another one. And then finally in the book of Numbers, Parashat Balak, right? Balak was the king who hired the prophet Bilam to try to curse the Israelites as they made their way through. And very smart people have noticed that it's interesting that Moses doesn't have a portion named for him, or Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or anybody that we would associate as a Jewish person. The only portions that have names are named for people who are not Jewish, which is it's an interesting thing to notice.
Which, of course, to a Gentile ear, it's going to make sense for Balak and for Yitro, but you'd think, well, Noah was Jewish, but I have to remind our folks that Noah predates the Jewish people, of course, because Avram, who became Avraham, for whom you are named, was the first Jew in a sense. He was a Hebrew. And then, of course, Isaac, and then Jacob and the tribes. So that's amazing that the 3 names of the Torah portions that are the only 3 individual names that are given, none of them are Jewish. Fascinating.
Right? It's just, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, take us into the story. Maybe bring us back just a little bit, Rabbi. And again, I apologize. I'm going to stop apologizing, but normally I've got all my notes and have all this in front of me. But how initially, of course, Moses is in Egypt. Moses has this anger issue, and he strikes down the Egyptian, and then he kind of has to flee into exile because he's scared of imprisonment or worse, capital punishment. He goes into the wilderness, and is it there that he marries and comes into relationship with Jethro?
Yeah, so he flees. He runs all the way from the land of Egypt to the land of Midian. Midian would be basically across the Arabian Peninsula. He travels a very, very long way. And when he gets there, it talks about how he winds up at a well. there are the daughters of Jethro, who is the priest of that part of the world, the priest of Midian. And there's a group of shepherds that are harassing his daughters who are trying to get water for the sheep. And Moses, because he's an empathetic fellow, and we've seen already, he takes these very decisive strikes when he sees people who are being mistreated. He chases away the shepherds and he draws water for the sheep of these women that he doesn't know from a hole in the wall, but happen to be the daughters of Jethro. So the daughters come home, and Jethro greets them and says, "Wow, you're home early tonight. What happened?" But apparently this harassment had been a regular thing. And they said, "This Egyptian guy saved us, and he drew water for us, and that's why we were home so early." So Jethro said, "And you just left him out there? Why don't you invite him in, and give him bread, right? He could have a meal with us." And the rabbis understand that have a meal with us is kind of a euphemism.
Right.
What it means is like he should really marry one of you, right? That's the kind of guy I want in the family.
So the lesson right off the bat is, if your father's inviting somebody to dinner, you better be aware.
Look who's coming to dinner. It's the Egyptian guy, right? And the rabbis know that because Jethro says, "Why don't you invite him in and he can have some bread?" But the next verse says that Moses stayed with them and married his daughter named Zipporah. So the rabbis understand there was a euphemism there, but that's where he meets Zipporah. And he has a son. We know from later on in the narrative, he has another son. He has 2 sons. And he lives there for a long time. He stays there until he's 80 years old, when he stands before Pharaoh when the plagues start in the portion afterwards. So he runs away from Egypt when he's a relatively young man. He strikes down the Egyptian. He has to flee, as you mentioned. But a good portion of his life, maybe even most of his life, is spent living with Jethro in the land of Midian. And we really don't know anything about what he was doing except for shepherding sheep. But he built a whole life there. He had a family there, all of these things. And then he encounters God at the burning bush, and God says, "Time to go back to Egypt." And he does, and that's where the narrative kind of picks up. So
Rabbi, is Midian, because am I right that Zipporah, so if Jethro is a Gentile, then obviously Zipporah is a Gentile.
Seems that way.
And so how is there discussion of all of this? How does this, and because later on, there's some controversy over his marriage to Zipporah, right?
So in the book of Numbers, that they talk about that Moses' sister and brother, Miriam and Aaron, have conversations about his wife. And God punishes them for that, but the conversations are happening. There's a reason why they were talking. Among the rabbinic commentators, there's questions about that. So Jethro is the priest of Midian, right? The implication is that he's a heathen priest. He's a Gentile. He's doing whatever religion they were doing in Midian at the time, and that's just what he was doing. Presumably, Zipporah, Moses' wife, was raised in that kind of way, and that was the household that he had. Other rabbis understand that Jethro, even at that point, was, even if he was the priest of Midian, he was kind of wavering that way. He was a little bit closer to Moses and to the Israelite faith, or to monotheism, than you would have thought. And certainly by the time we get to our Torah portion, the Parashat Yitro, Yitro is already convinced of the truth because he saw the plagues, he heard about the splitting of the sea, he's heard about the miracles that God had already performed in the wilderness, and that's why he came back, because he was won over by all of these things. So there is like a continuum of interpretation trying to figure out exactly where Jethro kind of fits in. They seem relatively sure. There's also some controversy as to whether, there's some controversy as to whether he converts at any point or whether he doesn't, whether he's, what would be considered nowadays maybe a righteous Gentile. Right. He's somebody that supports the Jewish people from the outside, and he lives his life in that way as the priest of Midian. There's some people who say the reason why the shepherds were harassing Jethro's daughters in the first place was because he had already renounced the state religion of that area, and he had become a monotheist, and that's why they were turning against him. Otherwise, it's hard to understand why they'd be harassing the daughters of the priest. So again, there's a range of interpretation about that, but it's so rich for interpretation. There's so many possibilities in the text, and you see a lot of contemporary issues as you try to make your way through it.
Folks, we're having an incredible night of conversation with Rabbi Avraham Bronstein from the Hamptons Synagogue. He's one of our favorite guests when he comes on every time, and many of you are making comments. You've signed in from all over, literally coast to coast, and including some new names. If this is your first or second or even your third visit, just say, I'm a first timer, I'm a second timer. We want to get to know you. And in fact, Rabbi, off the top of my head, I think there was some emails back and forth. I think I may be with you this summer. Is that right? We're trying to work something out with that?
We are definitely trying to work something out, because one of the great programs we do in the summer is an author discussion series, which plays to a great crowd here in West Hampton Beach and then gets televised for a National Jewish Book Month in November. And as I understand, you have a book coming out.
Yeah, my new book is coming out on the life of Nehemiah, Nehemiah. I'll have to get the pronunciation down right for my Jewish audience, and I do hope that comes together and that I get to be with you. But folks, we're having an incredible conversation with the rabbi. If you are just signing in, Danny, you were one of the names. Danny, where are you from and how did you hear about us? Great to have you with us tonight. Danny, tell us what town you're watching from, what city. But Rabbi, I want to pause here for a moment, because this is one of these moments of reflection, and maybe you can guide us through this. Rabbi, one of the most fascinating and life-giving things to me, as I have had the privilege of interacting with the Jewish people, is what you've referenced a few times here tonight. You've referenced, we'll come to something, you say one interpretation says this, another interpretation says that, another interpretation says this, but you don't say, but this is the right one. You don't kind of bring that definitive right interpretation. And there's the old joke, okay? There's the old joke, two Jews, three opinions, right? And yet, and certainly that brings with it, there's certain challenges that come, when there's all kinds of conversation. But the benefit of that has blessed my life, and I would love you to reflect on, is that within the Jewish tradition, there is an ability to say, well, here's one interpretation of this text. Here's another interpretation of this text, maybe even a third. And to find an element of truth in all of those interpretations, as opposed to saying all the other ones must be wrong and mine must be, unilaterally and conclusively the sum total of truth. And evangelicalism, I think it's a weakness in our construct, has a tendency, not always, but has a tendency to only look for, well, what is the answer? What is the right interpretation? Talk to us as a rabbi, talk to us as an educator. How is that? How does that work itself out? Because to our minds, well, we want to know the right answer. I don't want to know 5 different answers. I want to know the right answer because I only want to study the right answer. Help us frame our thinking in what it is to approach text and what it is to approach life with ways that say, listen, the truth can be found in the dynamic unpacking of all of these possibilities together. Walk us through that a little bit.
Okay, so here's two rabbinic texts maybe to help unpack that a little bit. Okay, the first one says, it's a comparison. It says that a Roman king, that was the example they would have used back then, establishes kingship by minting coins. And there's thousands of coins that are minted, and each of them bears the likeness of the king, right? But the King of Kings, right, God, mints coins also, and every coin is in the image of God, but no 2 coins are alike.
Wow.
Right? right? We're the coins.
Right.
So that's one way of understanding it. But there's a certain nobility to that, but there's also a certain humility to that, because the idea is you see anybody else's perspective, and you know that that person is just as much an image of God as you are. That perspective is just as much a reflection of the divine as you are, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a certain pluralism that's built in from the very outset. Just by saying humanity is created in the image of God, the image of God is really the plurality, the multiplicity of all of those different images together, which is like a really powerful idea. It's one text. The other text is, there's a Talmudic discussion about two schools of rabbis who lived in the first century or so of the Common Era. The house of Shammai, the house of Hillel.
Right.
Shammai and Hillel were two rabbis who lived in the first century. One was the Nasi, the prince, the president of the Jewish community. One was like the chief justice. And they each had a school, and the schools fought with each other over any matter of ritual law or theology that you could possibly imagine. They argued apparently once for 3 years about whether it was better or not that the world was created. The house of Shammai said better the world wasn't created. The house of Hillel said better the world was created. And they fought about this for 3 years, and they hashed it out. Eventually, according to the Talmud, a heavenly voice emerged and said, because you have to know what to do, right? You have to have a right answer. So the Talmud said in Hebrew, Elu va'elu divrei Elohim chayim, which in English means these and these are the words of the living God, meaning one argument is not more justifiable than the other.
Wow.
They're both right, but halacha kibeit Hillel, but the law, right, the rule follows the house of Hillel, which is still normative rabbinic Jewish practice in most cases. And the Talmud says, how does that square, right? If they're both the words of the living God, if both arguments are equally correct or justifiable, which you can imagine they would be, why do you follow Beit Hillel over Beit Shammai? And one of the rabbis pops up and says the reason why is because of how they taught in their respective academies. The house of Shammai would teach their opinion and nothing else. The house of Hillel would teach their opinion and also the opinion of the house of Shammai. They would say, if you want to know the answer, we say it like this, they say it like that. The house of Shammai said that this is what we think the answer is, and because of that, Jewish practice follows the house of Hillel. So there's two ways to understand that, obviously, right? One way to understand that is what they're saying is both answers kind of work, but the house of Hillel's analysis is more rigorous because it was always open to opposing interpretation, right? They sharpened themselves by testing them against the other side. Maybe another interpretation would be what it really is not a reflection of the analysis being better, but really it's a reflection of the empathy. And that's really the point of this.
Absolutely. Right? And isn't that empathy also, first of all, these two stories are incredible. I'm going to reference the first one in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But to stay with the second one for a moment, isn't that empathy also, Rabbi, a sign of humility? It's a sign of acknowledging, listen, our brothers are also wrestling through these questions, and this is how they're understanding it. And I think whenever we approach theology, especially really any discipline in life, but especially theology, the first good place to begin is with a solid dose of humility.
100%. I agree with that completely. It's a very Jewish perspective, I think.
Well, and I want to go back and I really want to speak listen, you're getting me jet lagged tonight. And so there's the old Latin saying, in Latin saying is in vino veritas, in wine there is truth. In other words, if you're drinking, the truth comes out. I am not drinking tonight, but I am jet lagged and the effect is the same. So in jet lag, there's veritas. I'm going to speak kind of candidly for a moment. And I want to go back to your first example of the Roman coins. And folks, if you listened carefully to Rabbi Bronstein, our eminent guest tonight, he said this, he said, it dealt with the image of God. And I want to pause there because so many times when we interact with the Jewish people, we over and over and over again hear referenced this thing of the dignity of the image of God, that mankind was created in God's image. God put his breath, his image, his divine essence within creation. And beloved, what I want to challenge us with tonight is this, and please hear me. I grew up in evangelicalism my whole life. And unfortunately, and I believe to our detriment, most of evangelical theology starts not with the image of God, but starts with the fallenness of man. The first line in evangelical theology that we hear is, "You are a sinner separated from God." And then, of course, those 4 spiritual laws that we're also familiar with. And beloved, of course it is true. By the way, it's also true in Judaism that this concept that there's a fallenness, that there was a choice in the garden that Adam and Eve made that had, terrible consequences. But the Jewish narrative always begins much more strongly recapturing this sense that each of us are created in the image of God, and that even in our brokenness, even in our fallenness, God is telling a beautiful story. And beloved, it makes all the difference in the world when you amplify and when you rejoice in the fact that no matter what we're going through, God's image is there, and we can focus on that image of God. And I have just found it so incredibly life-giving that when I meet a person on the streets, whoever I'm meeting, whoever I'm interacting with, when I begin to view that person not in their fallenness, not in their separation from God, but I look at that person as this person is a divine masterpiece. They carry within them the image of God. God is telling a story through their life. Maybe they're not aware of it. Maybe they're far from God in the moment, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't know them, see them, love them. And I begin from that place. It changes my perspective. And so, Rabbi, I just want to thank you and just thank the Jewish people. If there are any people on earth who have a right to focus on the fallenness, the brokenness of mankind, it's the Jewish people. You've experienced that throughout history. Tragically, you're experiencing it again today as anti-Semitism rages at horrible heights that we haven't seen in so many years. And yet, the Jewish people point us back to the dignity of all humanity. And I think that's such a powerful metric, a powerful worldview for us to operate from. What are your thoughts, Rabbi?
I was really struck. What resonated for me in what you just said was your experience walking down the street and seeing the person, on the side, the homeless person or the person that looks a little bit broken. I love understanding that teaching as, well, like this. You can understand people being created in the divine image as an expression of innate rights, but you could also understand it, and I think that's where you were going, as understanding it as innate responsibility. Right? I can say, I'm created in God's image. That makes me super special. Or you can walk down the street and say, oh my gosh, every single person that I see is created in God's image. And what do I owe them because they were created in God's image? And the other thing which struck for me as you were talking is this week's portion also is special because it contains the 10 Commandments. The revelation at Sinai happens towards the end of this week's portion. The second commandment, of course, is the prohibition against idolatry, graven images. And it's been suggested that the reason why that is really the mantra of Judaism, if nothing else, is iconoclastic, it's anti-idolatry, right? In that sense, is because what idolatry really means, right, is not recognizing that where is God's image in the world? God's image is in the face of the other person. If you worship anything else, if you elevate anything else over that other person, that's basically a form of idolatry. You're creating an image instead of realizing God's image actually is literally, right, the other person, because the other person is created in God's image.
Folks, this is so rich. We're having an incredible conversation with Rabbi Avraham Bronstein. So many first-timers tonight. Fantastic. Vicki Fulmer from M-Star in Bechtelsville. I just preached there last month. Welcome, Vicki. She's a first-timer. So many fantastic people from around the country. Our hour is running by us here. And in just a few minutes, my kids are arriving. They're flying down from Buffalo. They're going to be with me at the memorial service on Saturday. And so they will be arriving soon. Folks, if you have not yet done so, would you please hit the share button? Hit the share button. Help us spread the word of Jerusalem-based Christianity. Many of us know the teachings of Jesus, but we don't know the faith of Jesus. You know, we know what Jesus taught about, but what did Jesus believe? How did Jesus pray? What were his holidays? How did he read the scriptures? How did he understand his interaction with his brothers and sisters, the Jewish people? This is an incredible journey for us into the heart of the biblical principles. I don't even like calling this the Jewish roots of our faith. Even that slight nuance is, I think, incorrect. These are the biblical roots of our faith. This goes all the way back. For example, Shabbat goes all the way back to Bereshit, all the way back to Genesis. These are the absolute biblical principles that God revealed through the Jewish people, that the Jewish people would be an Or HaGoyim, a light to the Gentiles, and that all of us would be drawn into relationship with the God of the universe, Hashem, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who we as Gentiles have come to know through Jesus, the Jew. But Jesus never came to start a new religion called Christianity. In fact, when they accused him of that, he said, absolutely, he said, I did not come to abolish the law. He upheld the law as good and as righteous, but he said, I'm come to fulfill it, that we would not only walk in the that we would not only walk in the form of the law, in the form of the mitzvot, but that we would also understand the heart of them. What was the lesson that God wanted us to learn? We have just a few minutes tonight. Rabbi, I'd like you, would you do me a favor and take 2 or 3 moments and just expound for another moment or two on Yitro, any other principle you want to bring out? As you do that, I'm going to go off screen. Ben, we're going to keep the rabbi talking, but I've got to get the power cord because my computer's down to 11%, and I don't want to die here live on air. Rabbi, take us through just another 2 or 3 minutes as I get this power cord plugged in on another final lesson from Yitro before we close off. Over to you, Rabbi.
Okay. Here's a bit of a closing lesson. So this week's portion contains the theophany at Sinai, the revelation at Sinai. And the revelation at Sinai happens not any place where you would expect. It happens in the middle of the wilderness. And the rabbis note that. They wonder, why does the revelation at Sinai happen in the wilderness as opposed to a city where more people can be around, or where different things could happen, or where there's infrastructure, or any of the things that you would expect around a major historical or world event like the revelation of the 10 Commandments would be. And the rabbis give a few reasons for that. And one of the reasons that they state is that they say, if the revelation at Sinai had happened, not at Sinai, but happened, let's say, in Jerusalem or in the land of Israel, they would say that then historically throughout the rest of the world, the Jewish people would claim ownership over the Torah. They would say it belongs to us because it happened in our country. It happened in our space, therefore it's ours. God deliberately, according to this interpretation, this rabbinic interpretation, gave Israel the Torah, revealed the 10 Commandments in the middle of the wilderness, which was a place that was ownerless but accessible to everyone, to emphasize the fact that the reason why it was being revealed to Israel is nothing innate about the Jewish people or about Israel, but it happens to be that Israel were the ones who showed up. Theoretically speaking, anybody could show up, and the Torah really belongs to everybody and has a universal message. And that's the power, that's the significance of the Torah being given in the wilderness. The wilderness belongs to nobody, which means that the wilderness is accessible to everybody. And in that same sort of sense, the Torah itself, the commandments and the principles behind them themselves, are ownerless in that way. They belong to nobody, really, but they're accessible to everybody.
Beautiful. And Rabbi, wouldn't you say, I think of all of the biblical characters who had significant encounters with Hashem in the wilderness. We just kind of see this throughout both the Hebrew Bible and, by the way, also the Christian Bible. The very famous story of Jesus. It says that Jesus was led by the Spirit of God into the wilderness, and Jesus went through this wilderness experience. The Apostle Paul had 14 years that he was in the wilderness in Arabia. And I think this speaks to each and every one of us, that when we are in our wildernesses, we can encounter God, right? You might be in the wilderness right now, God forbid, of a time of sickness or a time of financial crisis or just a time of a time of emotional duress. And we all have a tendency to try to run away from wildernesses. Maybe we try to distract ourselves with television or whatever these things are. But when we embrace the wilderness, when we embrace the solitude of that moment, when we embrace the difficulty of that moment, I believe that we can really somehow more clearly hear the voice of God speaking to our lives.
I love it. Even though the goal is, eventually it's to get back to the promised land.
Of
But
course.
you have to go through the wilderness first, maybe.
Absolutely. 110%. Folks, it's been an incredible night. My first night back after this blessed trip in Israel, leading the YWAM group. Rabbi, I had the privilege, there's a group called YWAM, and YWAM is basically the Chabad of evangelicalism. So they are a group, they have 2,900 YWAM centers or bases all around the world. They have 30,000 full-time workers in those bases. And in addition to those 30,000 full-time workers, they have about 25,000 workers that come for a year or two and volunteer. So a total of about 50,000 worldwide. And so we brought their entire global leadership team to Israel. It was an amazing, amazing 10 days there. And folks, I'm telling you, there is a solution to anti-Semitism. It is not a problem that cannot be solved. The solution to anti-Semitism is to create philo-Semites, to create friends of the Jewish people, friends of Zion. And that is most powerfully done by bringing people up on a tour to Israel. And that is what you, my Eagles Wings partners, help me to do when you stand monthly with us in our work. If you've never yet made a gift to Eagles Wings, would you just go tonight? If this teaching has been a blessing to you tonight, would you go to eagleswings.org/donate and make your first gift and become a part of global Jerusalem-based Christianity so that we can continue this really cutting edge, cutting ground, new ground work that we do all around the world. Rabbi, it's been great to be with you tonight. I apologize that I am jet lagged and half baked, but I have enjoyed this immensely, as I know all of us have. Rabbi, do you have folks who would want to follow your teachings? They'd want to see your sermons. Are you present on social media? How do they interact with you?
You can find me on Facebook or on Twitter. Just search for Avraham Bronstein, Rabbi Avraham Bronstein. And you can subscribe to the YouTube channel of the Hampton Synagogue, where weekly sermons or periodic sermons appear also.
And I'm telling you, the services at the Hampton Synagogue are so powerful, so beautiful. There's such a sense of the holiness of God, the presence of God there. I love that I get to be connected to this beautiful synagogue where my two sons, Michael and Daniel, had the privilege to have their B'nai Mitzvah. And Rabbi Bronstein was a huge part of helping that come to pass. And I was so blessed by that.
And those services also are available on television, the Jewish Broadcasting Service. You can go to jbstv.org. It's a nationwide cable television station. We have services on multiple times every Friday evening and Saturday morning. Transliteration, transcriptions on the screen, so you can follow the Hebrew. You can get a real sense of the music and just the majesty of what we're able to put on.
Absolutely. Rabbi, I have to tell you this, because of course you mentioned the music, and I think of my dear brother, Cantor Nathaniel Hirschtick, who is your cantor. An unbelievable gift musically, and I just love when I don't know if you know that about 6 weeks ago, I was a guest at the Allgemeiner banquet.
Mm-hmm.
They were honoring my dear friend Pat Boone. And so I was a guest at the Allgemeiner banquet, and Cantor Hirschtick was the musical guest, and he saw me in the congregation. Yep. And he said, "Bishop, you got to come up and sing with me." So he pulled me out of the crowd and got me onto the platform to sing at the banquet. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is, last night, as I'm flying home on El Al from Israel, I look behind me, and who is sitting? I have wanted to meet this person for years. I've wanted to meet him. And I look behind me on the plane, and there is Avraham Fried.
Whoa.
You know Avraham Fried, of course, right?
Yeah, of course.
The great, he's a singer, everybody. Would he be considered a Hasidic singer?
He's a Hasidic singer, right? He's a Chabad Lubavitch background, but for the last 50 years, he's one of the people that really brought Jewish music into the cultural mainstream.
I'm telling you, his music is incredible. And I said, I can't believe this. This is from Hashem that I'm here. I've wanted to meet him for years. How am I going to meet him? He's sitting right next to me on the El Al flight. And so incredible. So I'm going to
We had him for 10 hours.
We did, and gave me his email address. And I'm telling you, it's amazing. So in God's time, all things work together well. And Rabbi, it's such a blessing to see you. Thank you for joining us tonight. And thank all of you for sharing your time with us this evening. Let's remember these lessons from Moses, from Jethro, from the wilderness, and let us continue. Let's meet God in the wilderness, and then take the principles that we learn in the wilderness and continue to journey into the promised land. Rabbi, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. Really, always such a pleasure.
Good night, everybody. Shalom. And remember, keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Good night, everybody. God bless.